Tasha's heart stopped when she saw her clothes scattered across the front lawn like garbage after a storm. Her favorite blue dress hung from the mailbox, soaked from the morning dew. Her photo albums were splayed open on the wet grass, wedding pictures staring up at the gray sky like accusations. She sat in her car for 10 minutes, engine running, unable to move. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be her life. The house she had called home for 8 years looked the same: red brick, white shutters, the rose bush she had planted on their first anniversary still blooming by the porch. But everything was wrong. Tom stood in the doorway, his arms crossed over his chest. Even from the street, she could see his face was set in that cold expression she had grown to fear over the past few months. Behind him, a woman with long blonde hair peeked over his shoulder. Jessica. The woman who had been just a friend from work, until she wasn't. Tasha finally turned off the engine and walked toward the house, her work shoes clicking against the concrete driveway. Each step felt like walking through thick mud. Her chest was tight and she could barely breathe. "Tom," she called out, her voice shaking. "What is this? What are you doing?" He didn't move from the doorway. "You know what this is, Tasha. We talked about this. We talked about counseling. We talked about working things out." Her voice rose and she hated how desperate she sounded. "We didn't talk about you throwing my things on the lawn like trash." Jessica stepped out from behind Tom, wearing one of Tasha's robes. The sight of it made Tasha's stomach turn. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you became such a burden," Jessica said, her voice sweet like poison. Tasha stared at the woman who had destroyed her marriage. Jessica was younger, prettier, everything Tasha felt she wasn't anymore. But seeing her in that robe in Tasha's house made something fierce wake up inside her. "This is my house too," Tasha said, walking toward the porch steps. "My name is on the deed." Tom held up a hand to stop her. "Was on the deed. I bought out your half. Check your bank account." Tasha pulled out her phone with trembling fingers. The number on her screen made her legs weak. $5,000. That was it. That was her half of the house they had bought together, worked on together, made a home together. "5,000?" she whispered. "The house is worth $200,000. After the mortgage and fees, that's what was left," Tom said, but he wouldn't look her in the eyes. "You'll find all the paperwork in that box by the garage." Tasha looked where he pointed and saw a cardboard box sitting next to her scattered belongings. Inside would be the legal papers that made her homeless. Papers she had never seen, never signed. "How could you do this without me knowing?" she asked. "Power of attorney," Jessica said with a smile. "Amazing what people will sign when they trust someone." The memory hit Tasha like a punch to the stomach. 6 months ago, Tom had asked her to sign some papers for life insurance beneficiaries. She had been rushing to work and signed without reading carefully. She had trusted him completely. "You tricked me," Tasha said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I protected my interests," Tom replied. "You weren't contributing anymore anyway. Working part-time at that bookstore, coming home tired all the time. Jessica brings something to my life that you stopped bringing a long time ago." Each word felt like a slap. Tasha had taken the part-time job because Tom had asked her to. He wanted someone home to take care of the house, to be available when he needed her. She had given up her career in marketing for him. "Where am I supposed to go?" Tasha asked. Tom shrugged. "That's not my problem anymore. But you need to get your stuff and leave. The neighbors are starting to stare." Tasha looked around and saw curtains twitching in windows, people pretending not to watch the destruction of her life. Mrs. Peterson from next door gave her a sad wave before disappearing behind her blinds. "I need time to pack properly," Tasha said. "Everything's already out here," Jessica said. "We packed it all up yesterday while you were at work. Wasn't much worth keeping anyway." Tasha walked to her clothes and started picking them up from the wet grass. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold anything. 8 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. With her husband and his mistress watching her gather her life from the lawn like a stranger. She found her jewelry box under a pile of books. The lock was broken and half her jewelry was missing. Her grandmother's ring was gone. The necklace Tom had given her for their 5th anniversary was gone too. "Where's my grandmother's ring?" she asked. "What ring?" Jessica said innocently. Tasha knew then that fighting was useless. Everything she had valued, everything she had worked for was already lost. The ring was probably sitting in Jessica's jewelry box upstairs. She spent an hour loading her car with what she could fit. Most of her furniture was too big, and Tom made it clear she wasn't welcome inside to get anything else. She had to leave behind photo albums, books, kitchen items her mother had given her, and most of her clothes. When her car was full, she stood on the sidewalk looking at the house one more time. Tom and Jessica had gone inside, probably celebrating their victory. The roses by the porch were still blooming, bright red against the white siding. She had planted those roses on a sunny Saturday morning when she still believed in forever. "I'll be back," she whispered to the house, though she didn't know how or when. It was just a feeling in her chest, a small flame of determination that Jessica's cruelty and Tom's betrayal couldn't quite put out. As she drove away, Tasha saw Tom's face in the front window watching her leave. For just a moment he looked sad, maybe even sorry. But then Jessica appeared beside him and he turned away. Tasha drove to the end of the street and pulled over, her whole body shaking with sobs she had been holding back. She had no home, barely any money, and no idea what to do next. But she was still breathing, still fighting, and that had to be enough for now. The worst part wasn't losing the house or even losing Tom. The worst part was realizing that the man she had loved and trusted for 8 years had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe longer. While she had been trying to save their marriage, he had been figuring out how to steal everything from her. But as Tasha sat in her car, surrounded by the pieces of her old life, something hard and determined began to grow in her chest. This wasn't the end of her story. This was just the end of the chapter where she was naive enough to trust people who didn't deserve it. The Sunset Motel was exactly as depressing as it sounded. The neon sign flickered between "no vacancy" and "weekly rates," casting sickly pink light across the cracked parking lot. Tasha sat on the thin mattress in room 12, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a map of nowhere. It had been 3 days since Tom kicked her out and she was already running out of money. The room cost $40 a night, and she had maybe $200 left after paying for gas and cheap fast food. Her credit cards were maxed out from when Tom had secretly used them to take Jessica on weekend trips. The divorce papers had arrived that morning, delivered by a man who looked apologetic as he handed her the manila envelope. Tasha had signed for them with a pen that barely worked, sitting on the motel room's single plastic chair while the delivery man waited awkwardly by the door. Inside the envelope was a letter from Tom's lawyer explaining that since she had already received her settlement from the house sale, she was entitled to nothing else. Her car, a 10-year-old Honda, was the only thing truly hers. Everything else, the furniture, the joint bank accounts, even her half of Tom's retirement fund, was gone. Tasha called her sister Linda in California, hoping for a place to stay while she figured things out. Linda's husband answered the phone. "Tasha? Linda's not here right now. Well, this is awkward. She told me not to give you money if you called." "I'm not asking for money," Tasha said, though she was. "I just need somewhere to stay for a few weeks. Look, I'm sorry about what happened with Tom, but Linda thinks you should have seen this coming. She says you were too dependent on him, and this is your chance to learn independence." The line went quiet except for the sound of children playing in the background. Linda's children, who called Tasha Aunt Tasha, and sent her drawings for her birthday. Children who would grow up hearing that their aunt was a failure who couldn't even keep her husband happy. "Can I at least talk to her?" Tasha asked. "She's really not available. But hey, good luck with everything." The dial tone felt like another door slamming in her face. Tasha set the phone down and stared at the wall. Even her own family thought this was somehow her fault. That night, she drove to the 24-hour diner on Highway 9 and sat in the back booth with a cup of coffee that cost $2. She made it last 3 hours, refilling it with the free coffee the tired waitress brought around every hour. The diner was full of people like her, people with nowhere else to go. Truck drivers grabbing quick meals between long hauls. Night shift workers coming off duty with exhausted faces. A woman about her age sat alone at the counter, staring at her phone and occasionally wiping her eyes. Tasha opened the newspaper someone had left behind and turned to the classified ads. Most jobs required experience she didn't have or offered wages that wouldn't even cover the motel room. But there, in small print at the bottom of the page, was an ad that caught her attention. Security guard needed. Night shift. No experience necessary. Training provided. Apply in person at Becker Security Services, 1247 Industrial Drive. Security guard work wasn't something she had ever considered, but it was something. And night shift meant she could look for better jobs during the day. Tasha tore out the ad and put it in her purse. By the end of the week, she was living in her car. The motel manager, a thin man with kind eyes, had let her stay 2 extra nights without payment when she explained her situation. But business was business and he needed paying customers. He gave her a list of local shelters and wished her luck. Tasha parked behind a 24-hour grocery store where the manager said she could stay as long as she didn't make trouble. She kept her clothes in the back seat and washed up in the store's bathroom each morning before the day shift arrived. The nights were the hardest. Even with all the windows cracked, the car was stuffy and uncomfortable. Every sound made her jump: footsteps, car doors, voices in the parking lot. She hadn't realized how scary the world could be when you had nowhere safe to go. On her 6th night in the car, it started raining. Not just a gentle shower, but a hard, steady rain that found every tiny gap in her car's weather stripping. Tasha sat in the driver's seat, listening to water drip onto the floor mats, and finally let herself cry. She cried for the house with the red roses. She cried for the marriage that had been a lie longer than she knew. She cried for the sister who wouldn't take her calls and the friends who had chosen Tom's side in the divorce without even asking for her version of events. But mostly she cried for the woman she used to be. The woman who had trusted easily and loved completely. The woman who had believed that being a good wife was enough to guarantee a happy ending. When the tears finally stopped, Tasha felt empty but somehow cleaner. Like the rain had washed away the last of her old illusions. She was homeless, nearly broke, and completely alone. But she was also free from the lies that had been slowly killing her for months. The next morning, she drove to Becker Security Services. The office was in a strip mall between a pawn shop and a tax preparation service. Inside, a receptionist with bright purple hair was filing her nails while talking on the phone about her weekend plans. "Excuse me," Tasha said when the woman finished her call. "I'm here about the security guard position." The receptionist looked her up and down, taking in Tasha's wrinkled clothes and tired face. "You got any experience?" "No, but I'm reliable and I need the work." Something in Tasha's voice must have convinced her, because she picked up the phone and called someone named Robert. "There's a woman here about the night guard job." "Yeah, she looks desperate enough to actually show up." 20 minutes later, Robert Becker walked out of the back office. He was a tall man in his 40s with graying hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He shook Tasha's hand firmly and looked directly at her when he spoke. "Tell me why you want to work nights," he said. Tasha had practiced a professional answer about flexible schedules and career opportunities. Instead, she heard herself saying, "Because I'm living in my car and I need money for food." Robert nodded as if this was a perfectly reasonable answer. "Most people lie in interviews. I appreciate honesty. When can you start?" "Right now." The job pays $12 an hour to start. After 90 days, if you're reliable, it goes up to 15. You'll work alone most nights, walking the perimeter of office buildings and making sure nobody breaks in. It's boring work, but it's honest work. You interested? Tasha felt something loosen in her chest. $12 an hour wasn't much, but it was steady. It was a place to start climbing back up. Yes, she said. I'm very interested. Robert handed her a clipboard with paperwork. As she filled it out, he said, there's a shower in the back office if you need to clean up before your shift. And there's usually leftover pizza in the break room from the day crew. Tasha looked up at him, surprised by the kindness in his voice. Thank you. We've all been where you are, Robert said quietly. The difference between people is what they do when they hit bottom. Some people stay down. Others use it as a place to push off from. That night, Tasha walked her first security rounds at a quiet office complex, checking doors and windows under the glow of parking lot lights. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was hers. For the first time in weeks, she felt like she had a purpose again. As she made her rounds, Tasha thought about Tom and Jessica, probably asleep in the house that used to be hers. They thought they had won. They thought they had destroyed her completely. But standing alone in the cool night air, wearing a uniform that actually fit and carrying keys that meant someone trusted her, Tasha felt the first stirring of something she hadn't felt in months: hope. 3 weeks into her security job, Tasha had developed a routine that kept her sane. She slept in her car during the morning hours, used the gym membership she couldn't afford to cancel for showers, and spent her afternoons looking for better opportunities. The work itself wasn't difficult. She walked the same routes every night, checking the same doors, writing the same reports. Most nights were completely quiet except for the occasional raccoon or stray cat. But the solitude gave her time to think, and thinking was both a blessing and a curse. Robert had been true to his word about the job being steady. Her first paycheck was direct deposited on a Friday morning, and seeing that money in her account even though it wasn't much made her feel human again. She celebrated by buying herself a hot breakfast at the diner instead of surviving on vending machine snacks. You're looking better, said Dolores, the day shift waitress who had started recognizing her. Less like you're carrying the world on your shoulders. I got a job, Tasha said, cutting into her eggs. It's not much, but it's something. Honey, something is everything when you're starting from nothing, Dolores said, refilling Tasha's coffee cup. I've been there myself. Twice actually. But look at me now, I own a house and my car's paid off. It just takes time. After breakfast, Tasha drove to the public library to use their computers and internet. She had started applying for day jobs online, hoping to find something that paid better than security work. Her background was in marketing, but those jobs required references from her previous employer, a company owned by Tom's best friend, who made it clear he wouldn't be giving her any recommendations. Tasha Patterson? She looked up from the computer to see Monica Williams, a woman she had worked with 5 years ago at a different marketing firm. Monica looked successful in her tailored suit and expensive bag. Monica. How nice to see you, Tasha said, hoping her voice sounded normal. I heard about you and Tom. I'm so sorry. Monica's expression was sympathetic but curious. Are you working anywhere now? Tasha felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Here she was, unwashed and wearing the same clothes she had worn for 3 days, sitting at a public library computer because she couldn't afford internet. I'm between opportunities right now, Tasha said, which was technically true. Well, if you're looking for work, you should know that Hartwell Industries is expanding their marketing department. They're looking for someone with experience in social media campaigns. Tasha's heart jumped. Hartwell Industries was one of the biggest companies in the city. A job there could change everything. Do you think they'd consider me? She asked. Monica hesitated for just a moment, long enough for Tasha to understand that her current appearance wasn't exactly interview ready. The hiring manager is Jessica Chen, Monica said carefully. I could put in a word for you, but you'd need to make a strong impression. The competition is pretty fierce. Tasha spent the rest of the day preparing for an interview that didn't exist yet. She used her last $20 to get her clothes cleaned at the laundromat and her hair cut at a discount salon. The haircut wasn't great, but it was professional enough. That evening, she called Hartwell Industries and managed to get through to Jessica Chen's assistant. She explained her background and requested an interview. The assistant was polite but non-committal. They would review her resume and get back to her. 3 days later, the call came. Jessica Chen would see her Friday at 2 p.m. Tasha had never wanted anything more in her life. This job could mean an apartment, decent food, maybe even the chance to start saving money. She spent 2 days practicing answers to interview questions, researching the company, and planning what she would wear. Friday arrived gray and drizzly. Tasha changed into her best outfit in the gym bathroom and drove to Hartwell Industries headquarters, a gleaming glass building downtown. The lobby was all marble and fresh flowers, the kind of place where she used to belong. Jessica Chen was younger than Tasha had expected, maybe 35, with short black hair and designer glasses. Her office overlooked the city and everything about it screamed success. Tell me about your most recent work experience, Jessica said after the basic pleasantries. Tasha had prepared for this question, but not for how it would feel to answer it. I took some time off to focus on my marriage, she said. But before that, I managed social media campaigns for several major clients at Harrison Marketing. And why are you looking to return to work now? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Tasha could lie, make up some story about being ready for new challenges. Instead, she found herself telling the truth. I'm recently divorced and I need to rebuild my career and my financial stability. Jessica nodded, making notes on Tasha's resume. I appreciate your honesty. Now, I have to ask, there's a gap in your employment history. What have you been doing for the past few months? Tasha's prepared answer died in her throat. She could see Jessica was the kind of person who would check references, verify employment, do background searches. Lying would only make things worse. I've been working as a security guard while I looked for opportunities in marketing, she said. Jessica's pen stopped moving. Security guard? Night shift. It's honest work, and it's given me time to keep up with industry changes and prepare for interviews like this one. The rest of the interview felt like a formality. Jessica asked technical questions about marketing strategies and social media platforms, and Tasha answered them well. But she could see in Jessica's eyes that the decision had already been made. We'll be making our decision early next week, Jessica said, standing up to signal the interview was over. Thank you for coming in. Tasha left the building knowing she wouldn't get the job. Not because she wasn't qualified, but because she had been honest about working security. In Jessica's world, people didn't fall that far and then climb back up to corner offices. That night at work, Robert found her sitting in the security office, staring blankly at the monitor showing feeds from various cameras. Rough day? He asked. Job interview. I think I blew it. Robert poured himself a cup of coffee from the pot that was always brewing in the office. Want to talk about it? Tasha found herself telling him everything about the interview, about her marriage falling apart, about living in her car and feeling like she was invisible to the world she used to be part of. You know what your problem is? Robert said when she finished. I'm sure you're going to tell me. You're trying to go backward instead of forward. You want to get back to where you were, but where you were didn't make you happy. If it had, your husband wouldn't have been able to destroy it so easily. Tasha stared at him. Are you saying this is my fault? I'm saying maybe it's not about getting your old life back. Maybe it's about building a better one. The phone rang before Tasha could respond. As Robert answered it, she thought about what he had said. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had been so focused on returning to her old life that she hadn't considered whether that life had actually been worth returning to. The call was about a break-in at one of their client sites. Robert grabbed his jacket and keys. I have to go deal with this, he said. But Tasha? That interview you think you blew? Maybe it wasn't the right job anyway. Maybe the right job is something you haven't even considered yet. After he left, Tasha sat alone in the quiet office, listening to the hum of the coffee maker and the distant sound of traffic. For the first time since Tom had thrown her belongings on the lawn, she wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was thinking about what she might build instead. The rejection email from Hartwell Industries arrived on a Tuesday morning while Tasha was eating breakfast at the diner. She read it twice, expecting to feel devastated, but instead felt oddly relieved. The job would have meant returning to a world that had never really accepted her anyway. Bad news? Dolores asked, noticing Tasha's expression. Actually, I think it might be good news in disguise, Tasha said, surprising herself. 2 days later, Robert offered her a promotion to shift supervisor. It meant an extra $3 an hour and the responsibility of training new guards. Tasha accepted immediately. Why me? She asked. Because you're the first person in 5 years who's never missed a shift, never shown up late and actually cares about doing the job right, Robert said. Plus you're smart. I can tell you're not planning to do this forever, which means you'll teach the new people properly instead of just going through the motions. The extra money meant Tasha could finally afford a small apartment. It wasn't much a studio above a pizza place with thin walls and a bathroom she shared with the apartment next door. But it had a bed instead of a car seat, and a hot shower she didn't have to pay for by the minute. Moving day was bittersweet. All her possessions fit in 4 cardboard boxes and 2 garbage bags. But as she carried her few belongings up the narrow stairs, Tasha felt richer than she had in months. Her neighbor, an older woman named Betty, poked her head out as Tasha was struggling with the last box. Need help, honey? I think I've got it, but thank you. Betty looked at the sparse boxes and smiled knowingly. Starting over? Something like that. Well, if you need anything sugar, eggs, someone to talk to, I'm right next door. And don't let the thin walls worry you. I'm deaf in one ear and I sleep like the dead. That night, Tasha lay in her new bed, a mattress on the floor, until she could afford a frame and listened to the sounds of the city outside her window. Cars passing, people talking on the sidewalk, the pizza place's delivery drivers coming and going. It was the opposite of the quiet suburb where she had lived with Tom, and she loved every noisy minute of it. Robert had been right about her being smart. Within a month of her promotion, Tasha had reorganized the training program, created more efficient patrol routes, and solved a problem that had been costing the company money for years. Their clients were noticing the improved service. You're wasted in security, Robert told her one evening as they reviewed the monthly reports. Have you ever thought about starting your own business? With what money? Tasha laughed. You don't need much money to start a consulting business. You've got a brain and you understand customer service. That's more than half the battle right there. The idea stayed with her. During her quiet patrol rounds, Tasha started paying attention to the businesses she was protecting. She noticed which ones seemed well-run and which ones had problems. The coffee shop in the Morrison building was constantly getting broken into because they left cash in an unlocked drawer overnight. The law firm on 5th Street had expensive equipment sitting in plain view of street-level windows. She started making suggestions in her reports. Small things at first: recommendations for better lighting, ideas for securing valuable items, observations about foot traffic patterns that might affect security needs. One morning, she got a call from Patricia Morrison, the owner of the coffee shop. I got your report about our security issues, Patricia said. Would you be willing to meet with me to discuss some improvements? Tasha had never done consulting work before, but she said yes. They met the next afternoon, and Tasha spent an hour walking through the shop, pointing out vulnerabilities and suggesting solutions. Most of her recommendations were simple and inexpensive: moving the cash register away from the window, installing a small safe for overnight cash storage, changing the locks to something more secure. How much would you charge to write up a formal security assessment? Patricia asked. Tasha had no idea what to charge, so she made up a number that seemed reasonable. $200? Patricia agreed immediately, which made Tasha realize she had probably quoted too low. But it was her first consulting job and $200 was $200. The assessment took her 3 days to complete. She researched similar businesses, studied crime statistics for the area, and created a comprehensive report with specific recommendations and cost estimates for each improvement. Patricia was so impressed that she asked Tasha to implement some of the changes personally. Then she recommended Tasha to 2 other business owners in the area. Within 2 months, Tasha had a small but growing consulting business on the side. She was still working nights at Becker Security, but her days were filled with meetings, site assessments, and research. She had business cards printed and opened a separate bank account for her consulting income. "Look at you," Betty said one evening as Tasha came home carrying a briefcase she had bought at a thrift store. "All professional and businesslike." "I'm trying," Tasha said. "You're succeeding," Betty corrected. "There's a difference." The apartment was starting to feel like home. Tasha had bought a used couch and a small table from a furniture consignment shop. She had plants on the windowsill and actual food in the refrigerator. Her car was paid off, her credit cards were slowly getting paid down, and she had even managed to save a little money. One Saturday morning, she was grocery shopping when she saw a familiar face in the produce section. Tom was standing by the bananas, looking older and more tired than she remembered. For a moment, their eyes met across the store. Tasha's first instinct was to hide, to avoid the awkward confrontation. But something had changed in her over the past few months. She walked over to him. "Hello, Tom." "Tasha." He looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot. "You look good." "Different." She was wearing jeans and a simple sweater, clothes she had bought with her own money. Her hair was longer now and she had gotten used to wearing less makeup. She felt more like herself than she had in years. "How are things?" she asked, genuinely curious. "Fine. Good. Jessica and we're doing well." But he didn't look like someone who was doing well. His clothes were wrinkled and there were dark circles under his eyes. Tasha found herself feeling sorry for him, which surprised her. "I'm glad," she said and meant it. "What about you? Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," Tasha said. "I'm building something new." They stood there for a moment in awkward silence, surrounded by shoppers and the smell of fresh fruit. Finally Tom said, "I heard you were working security." "I am. And I'm also running my own consulting business." "Consulting?" He looked genuinely surprised. "Security and business efficiency. Turns out I'm good at helping people solve problems." Something flickered across Tom's face, maybe regret, maybe just curiosity. That's great, Tasha." "Really?" "It is great," she agreed. As she walked away, Tasha felt a lightness in her chest that she hadn't expected. She had been afraid of running into Tom, afraid of how it would make her feel. But seeing him hadn't hurt the way she thought it would. If anything, it had reminded her of how much she had grown. That night at work, she told Robert about the encounter. "How did it feel?" he asked. "Like talking to a stranger," Tasha said. "Someone I used to know a long time ago." "That's when you know you've really moved on," Robert said. "When the past feels like something that happened to someone else." As Tasha made her rounds that night, she thought about the woman who had lived in that house with the red roses. That woman had been so afraid of being alone that she had made herself small to fit into someone else's idea of happiness. The woman walking these quiet halls at 2 a.m. was different. She was alone but not lonely. She was building something entirely her own, one small victory at a time. 2 years after Tom had thrown her belongings on the lawn, Tasha was sitting in a real estate attorney's office, signing papers to purchase her third investment property. The small duplex wasn't much to look at, but the numbers made sense, and Tasha had learned to trust the numbers more than appearances. Her security consulting business had grown beyond anything she had imagined. What started as informal advice to a coffee shop owner had become a legitimate company with 12 regular clients and a waiting list for assessments. Tasha had registered the business officially Patterson Security Solutions and hired 2 part-time employees to help with the workload. She still worked nights at Becker Security, partly because she enjoyed the work and partly because Robert had become too good a friend to abandon. But the consulting business was her real focus now, and it was profitable enough that she could start thinking about bigger goals. "Congratulations," said the attorney as Tasha signed the final document. "You're now a property owner." Tasha smiled, remembering how intimidating legal offices used to seem. Now they just felt like another part of doing business. The duplex was in a neighborhood that was slowly improving, the kind of area where young professionals were starting to move because they couldn't afford anywhere trendier. Tasha's plan was to renovate both units and rent them to tenants who would take care of the property because they were grateful to find somewhere decent they could afford. She had learned about real estate investing the same way she had learned about consulting, by paying attention and asking questions. One of her clients was a property management company, and the owner, Rebecca Singh, had become both a client and a mentor. Real estate is like security work, Rebecca had told her. It's about seeing problems before they become disasters and fixing small things before they become big things. Tasha's first investment had been a small house that needed work but was structurally sound. She had bought it with money saved from her consulting business, renovated it herself on weekends, and rented it to a young couple who treated it like their own home. The monthly rent was more than enough to cover the mortgage, taxes, and maintenance, with money left over for Tasha to save toward the next purchase. The second property had been easier because she had a track record. Banks were willing to work with her now that she could show consistent income from multiple sources and a history of successful property management. Now, with the third property, Tasha was starting to feel like a real investor rather than someone who just got lucky. She had a system for evaluating properties, a network of contractors she trusted, and enough experience to spot both opportunities and problems. "You're becoming quite the businesswoman," Robert said when she told him about the latest purchase. They were having their usual end-of-shift coffee in the security office, a ritual that had become one of the highlights of Tasha's week. "I learned from the best," she said, raising her coffee cup in a mock toast. "I didn't teach you about real estate. You taught me to pay attention, to see what other people miss. That's the most important skill in any business." Robert smiled, but Tasha noticed he looked tired lately. He had been working longer hours, taking on responsibilities that should have been shared with other staff members. "Are you okay?" she asked. "You seem stressed." "The business is growing faster than I can keep up with," he admitted. "I keep thinking I should hire someone to help with the administrative side, but I don't trust just anyone with the books and client relationships." An idea began forming in Tasha's mind, but she didn't say anything yet. She had learned to think ideas through completely before acting on them. That weekend, Tasha drove through her old neighborhood for the first time since the divorce. She told herself she was looking at potential investment properties, but really she just wanted to see how she felt about being back. The neighborhood looked the same: well-maintained houses with neat lawns and two-car garages. Middle-class dreams made manifest in brick and vinyl siding. Tasha drove slowly down Maple Street, past the house where Mrs. Peterson still lived, past the corner where she used to wait for the bus when her car was being repaired. And then she was in front of her old house. The red roses by the porch were overgrown and unpruned. The lawn needed cutting, and there was a stack of newspapers by the front door that suggested no one had been home for several days. One of the shutters was hanging crooked, and the paint on the front steps was peeling. Tasha parked across the street and sat in her car, studying the house that had once represented everything she wanted from life. It looked smaller than she remembered and somehow sadder. A car pulled into the driveway, Tom's car, though it looked like it hadn't been washed in months. Tom got out, moving slowly like someone much older than his actual age. He looked around the yard with an expression of defeat, then walked to the front door without seeming to notice Tasha watching from across the street. As he fumbled with his keys, Tasha noticed something else. There was a "for sale" sign in the front yard, partially hidden behind the overgrown roses. Her heart started beating faster. The house was for sale. That evening, Tasha called her real estate agent, an energetic woman named Carmen who had helped her with her investment properties. "I need you to find out everything you can about a house," Tasha said, giving Carmen the address. "Looking to expand into that neighborhood? It's pretty established. Might be hard to find good deals. Just get me the information. Price, how long it's been on the market, why they're selling." Carmen called back the next morning with details that made Tasha's chest tight with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. "The house has been on the market for 4 months, Carmen said. "They started at $210,000, then dropped to $195,000, and now they're asking $180,000. My contact at the listing agency says it's a divorce situation and they need to sell quickly." Tasha did quick math in her head. The house was worth at least $200,000 if it was properly maintained. At $180,000, even with the work it clearly needed, it would be a good investment. But more than that, it would be poetic justice. "What do you think they'd take?" Tasha asked. "In this market with that much time sitting unsold? Maybe $160,000, $165,000 if they're desperate." Tasha had enough cash for a substantial down payment, and her credit was good enough now to qualify for an investment property loan. She could buy the house, renovate it properly, and either rent it or sell it for a profit. Or she could just own it. The house that Tom had stolen from her through legal trickery and betrayal. Set up a showing, Tasha said. When do you want to see it? Tasha thought about Tom's tired face, about the overgrown roses and the peeling paint. About the woman who had once planted those roses believing in forever. As soon as possible. 3 days later, Tasha stood in the living room of her former home, listening to the listing agent apologize for the condition of the property. The owners have been going through some difficulties, the agent said diplomatically. But the bones of the house are solid. It just needs some cosmetic work. Tasha walked through rooms that held 8 years of memories. The kitchen where she had cooked dinner every night, hoping Tom would come home early enough to eat with her. The bedroom where she had laid awake listening to him make excuses for working late. The bathroom where she had cried quietly so he wouldn't hear. But the rooms felt different now. Smaller and somehow less significant. They were just rooms in a house that needed work, not the sacred spaces of her destroyed dreams. What do you think? The agent asked. I think, Tasha said slowly, that I'd like to make an offer. That night, Tasha sat in her apartment above the pizza place, looking at the offer contract she was about to sign. Betty knocked on the door with a plate of homemade cookies and sat down at Tasha's small kitchen table. You look like someone trying to make a big decision, Betty said. I'm buying a house. The house I used to live in with my ex-husband. Betty raised her eyebrows. That sounds complicated. It is. But it also feels right somehow. Like completing a circle. Are you buying it for revenge or for business? Tasha had been asking herself the same question. Both maybe. But mostly because it's a good investment. And because I want to prove something. What do you want to prove? That I'm not the same person who got thrown out of there 2 years ago. That I'm not someone who can be destroyed by other people's cruelty. Betty nodded thoughtfully. Honey, I think you already proved that just by surviving and building what you've built. But sometimes we need to prove things to ourselves more than to other people. Tasha signed the offer that night and submitted it the next morning. The response came back within hours. Accepted with a closing date 3 weeks away. She was going to own her old house. The house where Tom had betrayed her, where Jessica had worn her robe and smiled while Tasha's life fell apart. But this time she would own it completely. No shared deed, no mortgage she couldn't afford, no dependence on anyone else's goodwill or honesty. This time the house would be entirely hers. The closing on the house went smoothly, which felt anticlimactic after all the emotional buildup. Tasha sat in the attorney's office, signing document after document, officially becoming the owner of 247 Maple Street. The same address where her mail had been forwarded for 8 years, where she had changed her last name to Patterson after marrying Tom. Congratulations, the attorney said, handing her the keys. You're now the proud owner of a fixer-upper. Tasha drove to the house that afternoon, parked in the driveway that used to be hers, and walked up to the front door. The key turned easily in the lock, and she stepped into the empty living room. Without furniture, the house looked even smaller than she remembered. There were dark rectangles on the walls where pictures used to hang, and the carpet was stained and worn. The whole place smelled faintly of cigarettes, which was new. Tom had never smoked when they were married. Tasha walked through each room methodically, making notes on her phone about what needed to be fixed. The kitchen faucet dripped. The bathroom tile was cracked. The hardwood floors under the carpet were original but would need refinishing. The red roses outside were so overgrown they blocked half the front window. It was going to take at least 3 months and $15,000 to get the house ready to rent. But Tasha had the money, the time, and most importantly, the motivation. She was in the basement checking the furnace when her phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. Where are you? He asked. You sound like you're in a cave. I'm in the basement of my new investment property. The one you were so secretive about? When do I get to see it? Tasha hesitated. She hadn't told Robert or anyone else that she had bought her old house. It felt too personal, too loaded with history to explain easily. It's going to need a lot of work before it's worth showing off, she said. I like seeing potential. How about this weekend? Maybe when I get further along with the renovations. After she hung up, Tasha continued her inspection. In the master bedroom she found something that made her stop cold. Scratched into the wood trim around the closet door were the initials TP plus JM, with a heart drawn around them. Tom and Jessica had carved their initials into the trim like teenagers. In the house that had been Tasha's home, in the bedroom where Tasha had slept for 8 years. For a moment, The old hurt flared up so strongly that Tasha had to sit down on the floor. She had thought she was over the betrayal, had convinced herself that seeing Tom in the grocery store proved she had moved on. But seeing those carved initials brought it all back: the humiliation, the anger, the devastating loneliness of discovering that her marriage had been a lie. Then the feeling passed, replaced by something colder and more determined. Tom and Jessica had marked this house like territory, celebrating their victory over Tasha's life. But now Tasha owned the territory. She would sand down that trim, paint over their childish graffiti, and erase them from this space completely. That evening, Tasha sat in her apartment and made a detailed plan for the renovation. She would start with the essentials: plumbing, electrical, HVAC. Then cosmetic improvements: paint, flooring, fixtures. She would make the house better than it had ever been when she lived there with Tom. But first, she had another plan to execute. Tasha opened her laptop and created a new email account under a business name, Heritage Property Solutions. Then she drafted a letter to Tom, offering to buy any furniture or personal items he might have left behind when he moved out. The letter was professional and impersonal, signed by H. Chin, Acquisitions Manager. Tasha printed it on business letterhead she designed herself and mailed it to Tom's new address, which she had gotten from the real estate attorney. 3 days later, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Tom's number. "Is this Heritage Property Solutions?" Tom's voice sounded strained. "Yes, this is Helen Chin," Tasha said, disguising her voice slightly. "You received our letter about furniture acquisition?" "Yeah, but I'm confused. I don't have any furniture to sell. I moved out of that house months ago. Our records show you were the previous owner of 247 Maple Street. We purchased the property recently and found some items left behind. We're hoping to contact the former owners before disposing of anything." "What kind of items?" Tasha had walked through the empty house, but she improvised. "Some tools in the garage, a few boxes in the attic, some garden equipment. Nothing valuable, but we prefer to check before throwing things away." I don't need any of that stuff. You can dispose of it." "Are you sure? We're having an estate sale company evaluate everything this weekend. You're welcome to come by and claim anything you'd like to keep." There was a long pause. "This weekend?" "Saturday afternoon between 2 and 4. We'll have representatives on site. I might stop by, just to see if there's anything worth keeping." "Of course. The address is 247 Maple Street. Just ask for Helen Chin." After Tom hung up, Tasha sat back in her chair, her heart racing. Phase 1 of her plan was in motion. Tom would show up at the house on Saturday, expecting to meet with a stranger about leftover junk. Instead, he would find Tasha, the woman he had thrown away, now owning the house he had been forced to sell. But that wasn't enough. Tasha wanted witnesses to Tom's reaction. She wanted other people to see that she had not just survived his betrayal but had thrived beyond it. She called Carmen, her real estate agent. "I need a favor," Tasha said. "I'm having a small gathering at my new property on Saturday afternoon. Kind of a celebration with some business associates. Would you like to come?" "I'd love to. I'll bring some of my clients who are interested in investment properties. Is it okay if a few extra people show up?" "The more the better." Next, Tasha called Rebecca Singh from the property management company. "I'm having an informal open house at my newest investment property," she said. "Just showing it off to some friends and potential business partners. Are you free Saturday afternoon?" "Sounds great. Mind if I bring my husband? He's always curious about my work." "Please do." By Friday, Tasha had invited a dozen people to what she was calling a property acquisition celebration. She bought wine and cheese, rented a few folding tables, and prepared to host the most important party of her life. Saturday morning, Tasha arrived at the house early to set up. She wore a navy blue dress that she had bought for client meetings, professional but elegant, expensive but not flashy. Her hair was styled, her makeup was perfect, and she wore the diamond earrings she had bought herself for her birthday. She looked like success. More importantly, she felt like it. Carmen arrived first, bringing 3 other real estate agents and 2 clients looking for investment properties. Rebecca came with her husband and a business partner who was interested in Tasha's consulting services. Robert showed up with a bottle of champagne and a confused expression. "What exactly are we celebrating?" he asked. "New beginnings," Tasha said, which was true enough. By 2 o'clock, there were 15 people in the house, admiring Tasha's renovation plans and discussing the neighborhood's investment potential. Tasha moved through the crowd, playing the role of successful businesswoman and property investor. At 2:30, she saw a familiar car pull up outside. Tom sat in his car for several minutes, looking at the house and the cars parked in front of it. Tasha watched him through the front window, her heart beating so fast she was sure everyone could hear it. Finally he got out of the car and walked toward the front door. He looked older and more tired than he had in the grocery store, wearing a wrinkled shirt and pants that hung loose on his frame. Tasha opened the door before he could knock. "Hello, Tom," she said clearly, loud enough for her guests to hear. The color drained from his face. "Tasha? What are you doing here?" "I live here," she said simply. "Well, I own here. This is my house now." Tom looked past her at the well-dressed people holding wine glasses and discussing property values. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "I don't understand," he said finally. "It's simple," Tasha said, stepping onto the porch so they were eye to eye. "You sold this house because you needed money. I bought it because I could afford to. And now I'm showing it off to my friends and business associates." Behind her, Tasha could hear the conversations getting quieter as her guests realized something significant was happening. "But you were working security. You were living in your car." "That was 2 years ago," Tasha said. "A lot has changed since then." Tom stared at her, taking in her appearance, her confidence, the successful life she had built from the ashes of what he had destroyed. "The letter," he said weakly. "Helen Chen. That was me. I wanted to make sure you'd come. I wanted you to see this." For a moment they stood there in silence, the weight of history between them. Then Tom's face crumpled with what looked like regret. "Tasha, Tom?" They both turned to see Jessica getting out of a car parked behind Tom's. She looked exactly the same as she had 2 years ago, blonde, pretty, dressed in clothes that were trying too hard to look expensive. But as she walked up the driveway and saw Tasha standing confidently on the porch of their old house, surrounded by well-dressed guests, Jessica's expression changed from confusion to something like fear. "What's going on?" Jessica asked, looking between Tom and Tasha. "Tasha bought the house," Tom said quietly. Jessica's eyes went wide. "What do you mean she bought the house?" "She couldn't afford the house. She was working as a security guard." "Things change," Tasha said, her voice calm and steady. "People change. Some people learn and grow from their mistakes. Others just keep making the same ones." Robert appeared beside Tasha, having noticed the tension on the porch. "Is everything okay out here?" "Everything's perfect," Tasha said, looking directly at Tom. "I was just showing some old friends what I've accomplished since they last saw me." Tom looked like he wanted to say something, but Jessica grabbed his arm. "We should go," she said urgently. "Yeah," Tom agreed, his voice hollow. "We should go." As they walked back to their cars, Tasha heard Jessica hissing at Tom about how this was impossible, how Tasha couldn't have afforded to buy the house, how there must be some explanation. But Tom didn't answer her. He just got in his car and sat there for a moment, staring at the house that used to be his and was now Tasha's. When they finally drove away, Tasha's guests erupted in questions and congratulations. Carmen was particularly impressed. "That was your ex-husband?" she asked. "The one who kicked you out of this house?" "The very same. And now you own it?" "Lock, stock, and barrel." Robert pulled Tasha aside as the party was winding down. "That was quite a show," he said. "Feel better?" Tasha considered the question. Did she feel better? She felt vindicated, certainly. She felt proud of what she had accomplished. But more than anything, she felt free. "I feel finished," she said. "Like I finally closed a chapter that's been open too long." As her guests left and Tasha locked up the house, she realized that the plan had worked perfectly. Tom had seen her success, had understood that she had not just survived his betrayal but had built something better from the ruins. But the best part wasn't his shock or Jessica's fear. The best part was that Tasha had stood there surrounded by people who respected her, supported her, and celebrated her achievements. She had built a new life filled with genuine relationships and real accomplishments. Tom had taken away her old life. But her new life was entirely her own creation, and no one could ever take that away from her. Word spread quickly through the neighborhood about Tasha's party at the old Patterson house. Mrs. Peterson called the next morning, her voice bubbling with excitement and curiosity. "Tasha, honey, is it true? Did you really buy your old house back?" "I did, Mrs. Peterson." "Good for you. That Tom never deserved you anyway. And that woman he moved in with, well, I won't say what I think about her, but I will say the whole neighborhood was relieved when they finally left." "They were having problems?" "Oh, honey, the fighting was terrible. Police came by twice for noise complaints. And the yard went to pieces, weeds everywhere, newspapers piling up. It was such a shame to see the house looking so neglected." After hanging up with Mrs. Peterson, Tasha drove to the house to start the renovation work. She had hired contractors to handle the major repairs, but she wanted to do some of the work herself. There was something satisfying about personally fixing what had been broken. She started with the red roses. They were so overgrown they were more like a thorny wall than a flower garden. Tasha spent the morning carefully pruning them back, remembering how proud she had been when she first planted them as a young bride. "Those roses were beautiful when you lived here before," said a voice behind her. Tasha turned to see Mr. Rodriguez from across the street. He was an older man who had always been friendly when she lived in the neighborhood. "I'm hoping to bring them back," Tasha said, wiping sweat from her forehead. "You know, I have to tell you something. After you left, I felt bad about how things went down. Tom came around asking if anyone had seen you taking things that didn't belong to you. Like you were some kind of thief." Tasha felt her stomach tighten. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the only thief I saw was the one who stole a good woman's home while she was at work. Made it clear I wasn't interested in helping him paint you as the bad guy. Thank you for that. It was the right thing to do. And seeing you here now, successful and strong, well, it proves that sometimes justice takes its own time, but it comes around eventually." As Mr. Rodriguez walked back to his house, Tasha continued working on the roses. Each cut of the pruning shears felt therapeutic, like she was cutting away the overgrowth of the past 2 years. Her phone rang while she was loading the clippings into garbage bags. It was an unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Is this Tasha Patterson?" The voice was female, nervous. "Yes. This is Jessica Morrison. I think we need to talk." Tasha almost dropped the phone. "I'm sorry, what? Please don't hang up. I know you have every reason to hate me, but I need to see you. Can we meet somewhere?" Tasha's first instinct was to say no, to hang up and never think about Jessica again. But curiosity won out over anger. "Why would you want to meet with me?" "Because I owe you an apology. And because I need to tell you some things about Tom that you deserve to know." They agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown that afternoon. Tasha almost canceled 3 times, but something about Jessica's voice, the nervousness, the genuine-sounding regret made her keep the appointment. Jessica was already there when Tasha arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup like she was trying to absorb its warmth. She looked different than she had on Saturday, older, more tired, less confident. "Thank you for coming," Jessica said as Tasha sat down across from her. "I'm not sure why I did. Because you're a better person than I am." Jessica looked directly at Tasha for the first time. "I owe you a huge apology. What I did to you, what we did to you, was cruel and wrong." Tasha had imagined this conversation many times over the past 2 years, but she had never expected Jessica to sound so genuinely remorseful. "Why now?" Tasha asked. "Why apologize now?" "Because seeing you on Saturday, seeing what you've accomplished, made me realize what kind of person I helped destroy. And because living with Tom for 2 years has taught me exactly what kind of man I helped destroy you for." Jessica's hands were shaking as she reached for her coffee. "He's not the person you married, Tasha. I don't know if he ever was or if something changed him, but the man I've been living with, he's bitter and angry and he blames everyone else for his problems." "What do you mean?" "He lost his job 6 months after you left. Said his boss was jealous of his success, but I found out later he was caught falsifying sales reports. Then he couldn't find another job in his field because word got around about what he'd done." Tasha felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. "So that's why you had to sell the house. We couldn't afford the mortgage. And Tom, he became obsessed with tracking what you were doing. He drove by your apartment, asked people about your job, even hired someone to follow you for a while." "He what?" Tasha's voice was sharp with alarm. "I told him it was crazy, but he was convinced you were getting money from somewhere. He couldn't believe you were supporting yourself with security work and some consulting business. He kept saying you must have a man helping you, or that you were doing something illegal." Tasha thought about all the times she had felt like someone was watching her, all the moments when she had turned around expecting to see a familiar face. She hadn't been paranoid after all. "When he found out you bought the house," Jessica continued, "he went completely crazy. Started screaming about how you had humiliated him, how you must have planned this revenge for years. He threw things, punched the wall, scared me so badly I went to stay with my sister." "Where is he now?" "I don't know. I left him yesterday morning. Packed my stuff while he was out and moved back in with my parents. I'm 32 years old and I'm living in my childhood bedroom because I finally realized I'd tied myself to a man who destroys everything he touches." Jessica started crying then, quiet tears that she wiped away with paper napkins from the dispenser on the table. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I know what I did is unforgivable. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and that karma is real, and that you winning in the end is the best possible outcome of this whole mess. Tasha sat in silence for a moment, processing everything Jessica had told her. Part of her felt vindicated. Tom's life had fallen apart just as dramatically as hers had, but he had brought it on himself through his own bad choices. But another part of her felt something unexpected: pity. What will you do now? Tasha asked. Start over, I guess. Look for a job, find my own place, try to rebuild some kind of life that doesn't depend on taking someone else's husband. It's harder than you think, Tasha said. Starting over. I'm beginning to understand that. But seeing what you've accomplished, if you can do it after what we put you through, maybe I can do it too. They sat in awkward silence for a few minutes. Finally, Tasha stood up to leave. Jessica, she said, I appreciate the apology, and I hope you do manage to rebuild your life. But I need you to promise me something. What? If Tom contacts you, if he tries to get back together with you, don't tell him where I live or anything about my business. I don't want him knowing any details about my life. I promise. And Tasha, congratulations on everything you've built. You deserve all of it and more. As Tasha walked to her car, she felt oddly lighter. She had expected Jessica's apology to feel more satisfying, but instead it just felt like another door closing on the past. That evening, Tasha was at the house installing new cabinet hardware in the kitchen when Robert knocked on the front door. Surprise inspection? She asked, letting him in. I brought dinner, he said, holding up a bag from her favorite Chinese restaurant. Figured you might be too busy renovating to eat properly. They sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating takeout from paper containers while Tasha told him about her meeting with Jessica. How do you feel about all of it? Robert asked. Confused mostly. I thought I'd feel more satisfied knowing that Tom's life fell apart. Instead, I just feel done. Like I don't care what happens to either of them anymore. That sounds healthy to me. Does it? Sometimes I think I should feel more angry or more vindicated or something stronger than just indifferent. Robert set down his container and looked at her seriously. Tasha, do you know what I see when I look at you? What? I see someone who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and used it as fuel to build something amazing. I see someone who didn't let bitterness poison her, who didn't let revenge consume her, who just quietly went about the business of creating a better life. I did want revenge though. Buying this house was definitely about revenge. Maybe it started that way. But look around, you're not destroying this place or letting it rot. You're making it beautiful again. Even your revenge is constructive. Tasha looked around the house with its fresh paint and new fixtures, at the roses outside that were already starting to bloom again now that they were properly pruned. I guess you're right, she said. I know I'm right. And I know something else too. What's that? Robert moved closer to her on the floor, his expression suddenly serious. I know that I've been falling in love with you for months, and I was waiting for the right time to tell you, and I'm starting to think there's never going to be a perfect time, so I'm just going to say it now. Tasha's chopstick stopped halfway to her mouth. Robert? I know the timing is weird, sitting on the floor of your ex-husband's house eating Chinese food. But I've watched you rebuild your entire life from nothing, and I've been honored to be part of that journey, and I'd like to be part of whatever comes next if you'll have me. Tasha set down her food and looked at this man who had been her boss, her mentor, her friend, and now maybe something more. Robert, who had given her a job when she was living in her car. Who had taught her to see opportunities instead of obstacles. Who had supported every crazy idea she'd had without ever making her feel like she owed him anything. Robert, she said slowly, I think I've been falling in love with you too. I just didn't want to admit it because I was afraid of messing up the best friendship I've ever had. So what do we do about it? Tasha looked around the house that had once represented her greatest failure and now represented her greatest triumph. She thought about Tom and Jessica, still destroying themselves with bitterness and bad choices. She thought about the woman she used to be, so afraid of being alone that she'd made herself small to fit into someone else's life. That woman was gone. The woman sitting here now knew her own worth, trusted her own judgment, and wasn't afraid of taking chances on happiness. I think, Tasha said, moving closer to Robert, that we see what happens next. When he kissed her, surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and the warm glow of her own success, Tasha felt like she was finally, truly home. Tasha woke up the next morning in her apartment above the pizza place, but for the first time in months she didn't immediately start planning her day around work. Instead, she lay in bed thinking about Robert's kiss and what it might mean for their future. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. Good morning. No pressure about last night, but I hope you don't regret it. She typed back, no regrets. Coffee later? I'll bring donuts. Tasha smiled and got out of bed feeling lighter than she had in years. She was in love with a good man who respected her, supported her dreams and made her laugh. After everything she had been through, it felt almost too good to be true. She spent the morning at the house, directing the contractors who were installing new hardwood floors in the bedrooms. The house was starting to look like something from a home improvement magazine, clean, modern, but still warm and welcoming. Robert arrived at noon with coffee and donuts from the bakery downtown. They sat on the front porch steps, watching the contractors work and talking about their plans for the weekend. "I've been thinking," Robert said, "about what you said yesterday about this house being partly about revenge. What about it?" "I think you've gotten all the revenge you're going to get. Tom's seen that you've succeeded, Jessica's apologized, and you own the house. Mission accomplished. So what's the next mission?" Tasha thought about it. "I guess the next mission is just living well. Building the business, fixing up properties, maybe traveling some. I've never been to Europe." "I've always wanted to see Italy," Robert said. "We should go together." The words came out naturally, without the careful thought that Tasha used to put into every decision about the future. It felt good to make plans with someone again, to think in terms of we, instead of just I. They were finishing their coffee when a car pulled up in front of the house. Tasha recognized it immediately, Tom's car, though it looked even more beat up than it had on Saturday. "Speak of the devil," Robert said quietly. Tom got out of the car slowly, like someone much older than his actual age. He looked around the neighborhood nervously before walking up the front path. "Tasha," he said, stopping at the bottom of the porch steps. "Can we talk?" "We're talking," Tasha said, not moving from her spot next to Robert. "Privately? Robert is my business partner and my friend. Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of him." Tom glanced at Robert, then back at Tasha. "I need to know how you did it." "Did what?" "This." He gestured at the house, at Tasha's professional clothes, at the obvious signs of success. 2 years ago you were working security and living in your car. Now you own investment properties and throw parties for business associates. I need to know how you made that much money that fast." Tasha almost laughed. Even now, even after everything, Tom couldn't accept that she had succeeded through her own efforts. "I worked," she said simply. "I saved money, I learned new skills, I made smart investments. It's not complicated. Nobody goes from security guard to property investor in 2 years without help." "Who's backing you? Who's giving you money?" "I'm backing myself, Tom. With money I earned from my consulting business." "What consulting business?" "You never mentioned any consulting business when we were married." "Because I didn't have one when we were married. I built it after you threw me out." Tom shook his head, frustrated. "This doesn't make sense. You were never good with money. You never showed any interest in business or investments. You were just ordinary." The word hit Tasha like a slap, but not in the way Tom intended. Instead of hurting her, it made her realize how completely he had never understood who she was. "Maybe I was ordinary when I was trying to be the wife you wanted," she said. "But it turns out I'm pretty extraordinary when I'm being myself." "I don't believe this is all legitimate," Tom said, his voice rising. "Nobody changes that much. You must be getting money from somewhere illegal, or you're sleeping with someone rich, or—" Robert stood up so fast that Tom took a step backward. "That's enough," Robert said, his voice calm but dangerous. "You need to leave." "This is between me and my ex-wife," Tom said. "No, this is between you and reality," Robert replied. "And reality is that Tasha built a successful business through hard work and intelligence. The fact that you can't accept that says everything about you and nothing about her." Tasha stood up too, placing a hand on Robert's arm. "It's okay," she said. "Tom, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I don't owe you an explanation for my success. I don't owe you proof that it's legitimate. And I don't owe you anything at all. But I need to understand." "No, you don't. You need to move on with your life and stop obsessing over mine." Tasha's voice was steady and final. "Whatever problems you're having, whatever debts you need to pay or jobs you can't get, that's not my responsibility. It never was." Tom's face crumpled with what looked like desperation. "Tasha, please. I know I made mistakes, but we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something." "It does count for something," Tasha said. "It taught me what I don't want in my life." For a moment, Tom just stood there, staring at her with an expression of complete bewilderment. Then his face hardened with anger. "This isn't over," he said. "If you're doing something illegal to get this money, I'll find out. I'll expose you." "Tom," Tasha said quietly. If you come to my house again, if you follow me or investigate me or bother me in any way, I will call the police and file harassment charges. Jessica told me about you having me followed, about you tracking my movements. That stops now. Tom's face went pale. You talked to Jessica? She came to apologize. Something you might consider trying yourself instead of standing on my porch making accusations. Jessica had no right to. Jessica had every right to make her own choices. Just like I have every right to live my life without your interference. Tom looked between Tasha and Robert, seeming to finally understand that this confrontation wasn't going the way he had planned. Fine, he said. But don't think this makes you better than me. You got lucky, that's all. You got lucky and you got help and you're pretending you did it all yourself. Even if that were true, Tasha said, at least I didn't get lucky by cheating on my spouse and stealing their house. Tom's mouth opened and closed like he wanted to say something else, but no words came out. Finally, he turned and walked back to his car, moving with the defeated posture of someone who had just lost his last argument. As he drove away, Tasha felt Robert's hand on her shoulder. You okay? He asked. I'm perfect, she said and meant it. They watched Tom's car disappear around the corner, and Tasha realized that this had been the real test. Not buying the house, not throwing the party, but this moment when Tom tried one last time to make her doubt herself and she had stood firm. He really can't accept that you succeeded without him, Robert observed. He can't accept that I succeeded because I got away from him, Tasha corrected. Tom sees other people as extensions of himself. If I'm successful, it must be because of something he did. Or didn't do, or because someone else is helping me. The idea that I have my own capabilities that were being held back when I was with him is impossible for him to process. His loss, Robert said, pulling her closer. Completely his loss. That afternoon, Tasha's phone rang while she was picking out paint colors for the bathroom. The number was blocked, but she answered anyway. Patterson Security Solutions, this is Tasha. Miss Patterson, this is Detective Williams with the City Police. I need to ask you some questions about a harassment complaint. Tasha's stomach dropped. What kind of harassment complaint? Tom Patterson filed a report claiming you've been stalking him and making threats. He says you've been driving by his residence and workplace, and that you threatened him during a confrontation at your house this morning. Detective Williams, I think you have this backward. Tom has been the one doing the stalking. He came to my house uninvited this morning and made accusations about my business being illegal. I have a witness to the entire conversation. Can you come down to the station this afternoon? We'd like to get your statement and clear this up. Tasha agreed to come in and called Robert to ask if he would come with her as a witness. Then she called Carmen, her real estate agent, who had mentioned that her husband was a lawyer. David handles criminal defense mostly, Carmen said when Tasha explained the situation. But he can definitely help you with a harassment charge. Let me call him. 2 hours later, Tasha was sitting in a conference room at the police station with Robert, David, Carmen's husband, and Detective Williams. David had advised Tasha to bring documentation of her business success, bank statements, and any evidence she had of Tom's behavior. Let me make sure I understand the situation, Detective Williams said after reviewing Tasha's statement. Mr. Patterson claims you've been stalking him, but you have evidence that he's been following you? My ex-husband's former girlfriend contacted me yesterday and told me that Tom had hired someone to follow me for several months after our divorce, Tasha said. She was concerned enough about his behavior that she left him. And this morning's incident? Tom came to my house uninvited and accused me of making money illegally. When I asked him to leave, he became belligerent and threatening. Mr. Becker witnessed the entire conversation. Robert nodded. Mr. Patterson was clearly agitated and made several accusations about Tasha's business practices. When she asked him to leave, he said, "This isn't over," in what I would characterize as a threatening tone. Detective Williams made notes and asked a few more questions. Then he excused himself to make a phone call. This is pretty straightforward, David told Tasha while they waited. Tom is trying to use the legal system to continue harassing you, but his story doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The detective seems to understand that. Detective Williams returned 15 minutes later. I spoke with Mr. Patterson again, he said. Based on the evidence and witness statements you've provided, I'm going to recommend that he withdraw his complaint. I'm also going to suggest that both of you file restraining orders against each other to prevent any further contact. I don't want a restraining order, Tasha said. I just want to be left alone. The restraining order would legally guarantee that, David said. I'd recommend it. Tasha agreed and spent another hour filling out paperwork. By the time they left the police station, the sun was setting and Tasha felt emotionally drained. Dinner? Robert suggested. Somewhere nice with wine? That sounds perfect. They went to a small Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Over pasta and red wine, Tasha felt herself finally relaxing. I keep thinking this is the end of it, she said. That Tom will finally give up and move on. But every time I think it's over, something else happens. The restraining order will help, Robert said. And honestly, I think seeing you today, seeing how together you are, how clearly you've moved on, might finally convince him that he can't get back into your life. I hope so. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. You shouldn't have to. You've built something amazing, Tasha. You deserve to enjoy it without constantly dealing with your past. As they shared tiramisu for dessert, Robert reached across the table and took her hand. I have something to ask you, he said. What? How would you feel about making our partnership official? Not just personal but business too. I've been thinking about expanding Becker Security, maybe adding a consulting division. You've already proven you can build that side of the business. Tasha stared at him. Are you offering me a job? I'm offering you a business partnership. Equal shares, equal decision-making, equal profits. Patterson Becker Security Solutions. Robert, that's huge. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. You're the smartest business person I know and I trust you completely. Plus, I get to work with you every day. Tasha thought about it. Combining their businesses would create something much bigger and more profitable than either of them could build alone. Robert had the established client base and reputation. She had the growth potential and new service offerings. What about the property investments? She asked. Keep doing those. We could even expand into commercial properties eventually, maybe offer security consulting for property management companies. The possibilities seemed endless. Tasha imagined an office with both their names on the door, a team of employees, maybe even multiple locations eventually. Yes, she said. Yes, I want to do this. Robert's face lit up with the biggest smile she had ever seen from him. Really? Really? Partners in business and in life. He leaned across the table and kissed her, right there in the middle of the restaurant, not caring who was watching. As they walked back to their cars, hand in hand under the streetlights, Tasha thought about how different her life looked now compared to 2 years ago. She had lost a house and gained 3 houses. She had lost a husband who never valued her and found a partner who saw her potential. She had lost the illusion of security and gained actual security built on her own abilities. Tom could file all the complaints he wanted, make all the accusations he could think of. None of it could touch what she had built because she had built it honestly and she had built it to last. More importantly, she had built it to be hers, completely and forever. 3 months later, Tasha was standing in the fully renovated house on Maple Street, putting the finishing touches on what would soon become a rental property. The transformation was complete: new floors, fresh paint, updated kitchen, and beautifully landscaped yard with the red roses blooming better than they ever had when she lived there as Tom's wife. Patterson Becker Security Solutions had officially launched the week before, and they already had more business than they could handle. Tasha had hired 2 additional consultants and was training them on her assessment methods. Robert was handling the traditional security contracts while she focused on the consulting side and their expansion into property management security. The restraining order had worked. Tom hadn't contacted her or come near her property since the incident at the police station. According to Mrs. Peterson, he had moved out of town entirely, though she wasn't sure where he had gone. The house looks incredible, said Carmen, who had stopped by to take final photos for the rental listing. You're going to have no problem finding tenants for this place. Thanks. It feels good to see it finished. Tasha's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Emergency at the office. Can you come in? Her heart skipped a beat. Robert never called anything an emergency unless it was serious. She locked up the house and drove to their new office space, a converted warehouse that Robert had found in the Arts District. The parking lot was full, which was strange for a Saturday afternoon. Tasha hurried inside, expecting to find some crisis with a client or a security breach at one of their sites. Instead, she found the office decorated with flowers, balloons, and a banner that read, "Congratulations, Tasha." All their employees were there, along with Carmen and her husband, Rebecca Singh and her family, Betty from the apartment next door, Mrs. Peterson, Mr. Rodriguez, and even Dolores from the diner. Everyone was smiling and holding glasses of champagne. What's going on? Tasha asked, completely confused. Robert appeared from behind the crowd, wearing his best suit and carrying a small velvet box. Tasha's hands flew to her mouth as she realized what was happening. Tasha Patterson, Robert said, dropping to one knee in front of her. You are the strongest, smartest, most incredible woman I have ever met. You took a life that was falling apart and built something beautiful from the pieces. You turned betrayal into success and loneliness into love. Tasha was crying now, but they were happy tears. I love your determination, your kindness, your refusal to let other people's cruelty make you cruel. I love how you see potential where other people see problems. I love that you never gave up even when giving up would have been easier. Robert opened the ring box, revealing a simple but elegant diamond solitaire. I want to spend the rest of my life building things with you, businesses, properties, memories, maybe a family if we're lucky. Tasha, will you marry me? The room was completely silent except for the sound of Tasha crying. She looked around at all the faces of people who had supported her, believed in her, and celebrated her success. These people had become her chosen family, and Robert was the center of it all. Yes, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. Yes, of course I'll marry you. The room erupted in cheers and applause as Robert slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her. Tasha felt like her heart might burst with happiness. How did you arrange all this? She asked when they finally broke apart. I had help, Robert said, gesturing to the crowd of their friends. Carmen suggested the office as a location. Betty made the banner. Mrs. Peterson provided the guest list for your old neighbors. Rebecca brought the champagne. You all knew about this? Tasha asked the crowd. Honey, we've been planning this for weeks, said Dolores. Robert wanted to make sure everyone who cared about you could be here to celebrate. Tasha hugged everyone, accepting congratulations and admiring her ring. It wasn't the biggest diamond she had ever seen, but it was perfect, classic, elegant, and completely her style. I can't believe you managed to keep this a secret, she told Robert. It wasn't easy, especially when you kept asking why I was working late so much. I thought you were avoiding me because you were having second thoughts about our relationship. Never, Robert said firmly. The only second thoughts I had were about whether I was good enough for you. Robert Becker, you gave me a job when I was living in my car. You taught me to see my own potential. You supported every crazy idea I had and helped me build a business from nothing. You are exactly good enough for me. Carmen raised her glass of champagne. I'd like to make a toast, she said. To Tasha, who proved that the best revenge is living well. And to Robert, who was smart enough to recognize an extraordinary woman when he saw one. To Tasha and Robert, everyone chorused, raising their glasses. As the party continued around them, Tasha and Robert stepped outside onto the loading dock behind the office for a moment of privacy. Are you happy? Robert asked. I'm more than happy. I'm grateful. 2 years ago I thought my life was over. I thought losing Tom in the house meant I had lost everything that mattered. I had no idea that losing all of that would lead me to something so much better. Do you ever think about how different things would be if Tom hadn't kicked you out? Tasha considered the question. Sometimes. But honestly, I think we would have stayed married and been miserable. I would have kept trying to be the person he wanted instead of discovering who I really was. I never would have started my own business or learned that I was capable of supporting myself. So in a weird way, you're grateful to him? I'm grateful for the lesson. I'm grateful that I learned I was stronger than I thought. But I'm not grateful to Tom personally. What he did was cruel and wrong, regardless of how it turned out for me. Robert nodded. I just want to make sure you're marrying me for the right reasons. Not because you're grateful or because I represent security after a difficult time. Tasha turned to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. Robert, I'm marrying you because you see me clearly and love what you see. Because you challenge me to be better without trying to change who I am. Because you make me laugh and support my dreams and kiss me like you mean it. I do mean it. I know you do. And I love you not because you rescued me, I rescued myself. I love you because you're the kind of man worth building a life with. They kissed again as the sun set behind the city skyline, painting everything in shades of gold and pink. So, Robert said when they broke apart, where do you want to get married? Somewhere simple. Maybe the garden behind the house on Maple Street? The roses will be in full bloom in the spring. Getting married in your old house? That's pretty symbolic. It feels right. That house represents the worst thing that ever happened to me and the best thing I ever did for myself. Having our wedding there would complete the circle. Plus, we know the neighborhood, Robert said with a grin. Plus, Mrs. Peterson would never forgive us if she couldn't watch from her kitchen window. They went back inside to rejoin their engagement party, where Carmen was already making lists of potential wedding vendors and Betty was arguing with Mrs. Peterson about the best local caterers. I think our wedding is being planned for us, Robert observed. I'm okay with that, Tasha said. These people love us. Let them help. As the evening wound down and their friends began to leave, Tasha stood in the middle of their office, their business, their shared dream made real, wearing an engagement ring from a man who loved her exactly as she was. She thought about the woman who had sat in her car 2 years ago, surrounded by her belongings scattered on a lawn, feeling like her life was over. That woman had been so afraid of being alone, so convinced that she needed someone else to be complete. This woman, the woman she had become, knew that she was complete all by herself. Which meant that choosing to share her life with Robert wasn't about need or fear or desperation. It was about joy, partnership, and love. The best kind of love, the kind that made both people better, stronger, and more themselves than they had ever been alone. 6 months later, on a perfect spring morning, Tasha woke up in her apartment above the pizza place for the last time. Tonight, she would be Mrs. Tasha Becker, and tomorrow she would wake up in the house she and Robert had bought together, a beautiful Victorian in the historic district that they were renovating as both their home and the headquarters for their expanding business. The wedding was at 3 o'clock in the garden behind the house on Maple Street. Tasha had rented it back from her tenants for the weekend, a young couple who were so excited about having a wedding in their backyard that they had insisted on helping with the decorations. Betty knocked on Tasha's door at 9 a.m. with a tray of coffee and homemade muffins. "Wedding day," she announced. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous and excited and grateful," Tasha said, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Any regrets?" "Not a single one." Carmen arrived an hour later with her car full of flowers, followed by Rebecca Singh with a team of people to set up chairs and tables in the garden. By noon, the backyard of Tasha's old house had been transformed into a wedding venue that looked like something from a magazine. The red roses were in full bloom, creating a natural backdrop for the simple altar that Robert's brother had built from reclaimed wood. White chairs were arranged in neat rows on the lawn, with an aisle marked by petals from the garden. String lights were hung between the trees, ready to create a magical atmosphere for the evening reception. Tasha got ready in the master bedroom of the house, the same room where she had once found Tom and Jessica's initials carved into the trim. The trim had been sanded and repainted long ago, and now the room was filled with her bridesmaids, Carmen and Rebecca, and the happy chaos of wedding preparation. "You look absolutely radiant," Rebecca said as she zipped up Tasha's dress. It was a simple but elegant gown in ivory silk, with cap sleeves and a flowing skirt that moved beautifully when she walked. "I feel radiant," Tasha said, looking at herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was confident, successful, and deeply happy. She bore little resemblance to the broken woman who had once lived in this house and tried to make herself small enough to fit into someone else's idea of a perfect wife. Carmen handed her the bouquet red roses from the garden mixed with white peonies and greenery. "Something old?" she asked. Tasha touched the pearl necklace that had been her grandmother's. "Something new." She lifted her left hand to show off her engagement ring and the simple gold wedding band that would join it after the ceremony. "Something borrowed?" Rebecca asked. Tasha indicated the vintage hair clip that Betty had lent her, a family heirloom that had been worn by 3 generations of Betty's family members on their wedding days. "And something blue?" Carmen finished. Tasha lifted the hem of her dress to reveal bright blue shoes, comfortable flats that she could walk in easily and that made her smile every time she looked at them. "Perfect," Rebecca declared. "You're ready?" Downstairs, the guests were beginning to arrive. Tasha watched from the bedroom window as people filled the garden, their employees, their clients who had become friends, neighbors from both her old and new neighborhoods, and Robert's family who had driven in from 3 states away for the wedding. Mrs. Peterson was in the front row, wearing her best dress and a hat with flowers on it. Mr. Rodriguez was there with his wife, both of them beaming. Dolores had closed the diner early to attend, and half the regular customers had come with her. "Look at all these people," Tasha said to her bridesmaids. 2 years ago I thought I had no one. Now look. "You built this community," Carmen said. "You invested in relationships the same way you invested in properties, carefully, thoughtfully, and with an eye toward long-term value." The music started, a string quartet that Robert had hired to play in the garden. Tasha's chest tightened with emotion as she heard the familiar strains of Pachelbel's canon drifting up through the open windows. "It's time," Rebecca said gently. Tasha had chosen to walk down the aisle alone. Not because she didn't have anyone to give her away, but because she was giving herself freely, completely, and with full knowledge of her own worth. She walked through the house one more time, through the kitchen where she had once cooked meals hoping to make Tom happy, through the living room where she had sat alone so many evenings wondering why she felt lonely in her own marriage, past the front door where Tom had stood 2 years ago telling her she was nothing more than a burden. The woman who had lived in this house was gone. The woman walking through it now was someone entirely different, someone who knew her own strength, who had built her own security, who was choosing love from a position of power rather than fear. She stepped out the back door and onto the small porch that overlooked the garden. Everyone stood and turned to look at her, and the love on their faces was almost overwhelming. But her eyes went immediately to Robert, standing at the altar in his navy blue suit with a boutonniere made from one of her roses. He was smiling so widely that she could see it even from across the garden, and there were tears in his eyes. Tasha walked down the aisle slowly, taking time to smile at each person who had come to celebrate with them. These people had supported her, believed in her, and helped her build the life she was living now. They were her chosen family, and their presence made this moment perfect. When she reached the altar, Robert took her hands and squeezed them gently. "You look beautiful," he whispered. "You look pretty good yourself," she whispered back. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They had written their own vows, promising to support each other's dreams, to be honest even when it was difficult, and to build something together that was stronger than either of them could create alone. "I promise to see you clearly and love what I see," Tasha said, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to be your partner in all things business and personal, triumphs and challenges, ordinary days and extraordinary adventures. I promise to encourage your independence even as I offer you my complete commitment," Robert replied. "I promise to celebrate your successes, support you through difficulties, and love you exactly as you are while growing alongside you into whoever we become." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the garden erupted in cheers and applause. Robert kissed her with enthusiasm that made several guests chuckle, and Tasha felt like her heart might burst with happiness. During the reception, as they danced to their first song as a married couple under the string lights and the stars, Tasha looked around at the garden where she had once planted roses as a hopeful young bride. "Do you think she ever imagined this?" Robert asked, following her gaze. "Who?" "The woman who planted these roses the first time. Do you think she could have imagined that someday you'd be dancing at your second wedding in the same garden?" Tasha thought about it. "I think she imagined a happy ending," she said finally. "She just didn't know what form it would take. And now I know that the best happy endings are the ones you create for yourself." As the evening wound down and their guests began to leave, Tasha and Robert stood in the garden surrounded by the remnants of their wedding celebration. Tomorrow they would drive to Italy for their honeymoon, the trip to Europe that Tasha had dreamed about for years. When they returned, they would move into their new house and continue building their business and their life together. But tonight, they stood in the place where Tasha's old life had ended and her new life had begun, surrounded by the roses that had survived neglect and come back stronger than ever. "Any final thoughts about this house?" Robert asked. Tasha looked at the red brick walls, the white shutters, the front porch where Tom had stood and told her she was worthless. Then she looked at the garden where they had just been married, at the roses blooming in the moonlight, at her husband's face filled with love and respect. "I'm grateful," she said. "Grateful that I lost it, grateful that I got it back, and grateful that I'm strong enough now to let it go again." "Ready to go home?" Robert asked. Tasha looked at her husband, her partner, her friend, her future, and smiled. "I am home," she said. "As long as I'm with you, I'm home." They walked hand in hand to their car, leaving behind the house that had once broken Tasha's heart and had ultimately given her the strength to build something better. The roses would keep blooming in the garden, cared for by new tenants who would create their own memories in the space. And Tasha would keep building her new life, one choice at a time, surrounded by people who valued her and supported her dreams. She had learned that the best revenge really was living well, but more importantly, she had learned that living well had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with choosing joy, growth, and love. The woman who had once been thrown away like garbage had become someone who could never be thrown away again, because she knew her own worth and refused to accept anything less than she deserved. It was the best kind of happy ending, the kind that was really just the beginning of something even better. Thank you so much for reading Tasha's journey from heartbreak to triumph. To heart. I hope this story inspired you and reminded you that sometimes our worst moments can become the foundation for our greatest successes. Tasha's transformation from a woman who lost everything to someone who built an empire shows us that we're all stronger than we know. I'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in Tasha's journey? Have you ever had an experience where something that seemed like a disaster actually led to something better? Which character did you connect with most and why? If you were in Tasha's situation, what would you have done differently? Your comments and thoughts mean the world to me, so please share your reactions below.